There we go.
Okay.
All right. Does everybody see that that's recorded now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. It's working.
All right,
And
very good.
guys,
Yes, I'll take notes just so that you got it. Okay. All right. So I'm unprepared. First, I want to thank everybody for getting up this morning and coming so early. So typically we begin every board meeting with a prayer, and I can't remember if we do the prayer before. Do we do a prayer here, or do we just do do you just do it, Cantor?
I lead that part.
All right.
It's in a prayer. Because it's what I do. So I'm going to share my screen, everybody. So just hold on while I get that up here. So here you see the words for Matovu, which is the blessing that we begin our morning worship with. And this text has sort of been speaking to me as we've been talking about. Hi, Jill. As
Hi, I can't see you. Got the words on the screen, but hi. Oh, there you go.
We've been talking about obviously our dwelling place, and I'm just going to mute everybody because I'm going to have you guys sing with me. So hang on while I get that going. So it's a beautiful prayer talking about how fair our tents are, and of course, tents are a very temporary kind of dwelling, right? So I that really spoke to me. But what I really love is that when it talks about, I through your abundant love enter your house, I bow down in awe at your holy temple. Wherever we go, that love is going to be there because we are opening our hearts to it. Really, our congregation is us, and our tent is going to be a little temporary for a little bit, but that's okay. God's love's going to find us right there, wherever we decide to put that, because God's love found us while we're all in our own little personal tents right now. I'm looking at each other at our own little Zoom tents. So please join me. Matovu, Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Matovu, Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Vani berov chasecha, abo v'techa, eshtacha v'lechal kodshecha, b'yiratecha, Matovu, Matovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Okay, I'm stopping that share now. And back to you, Jeanette.
All right, very good. So first, a few meeting protocols. Does everybody know how to raise his or her hand on using Zoom? Well, you can do it via picture, or you can do it with their little blue hand. If you go to the top of your screen and click on, somebody help me here because I'm not good at this. On mine, I'm on an iPad, so I use More, and it says raise hand. So
right, and that's at the top, and I think it might be somewhere place else on a computer.
Okay, so if you can use that function. Otherwise, just raise your hand, and hopefully I'll see you. And if not, somebody will. And Rabbi and Cantor and Cherie always help me. So help me out, please. So this is our this is our fourth meeting, and typically our meetings we've had anywhere from 5 to 15 people. Typically we let you ask questions, and then at the end of the meeting we ask Rabbi to round it out with some thoughts. So I'm going to start with your questions. I don't think I received any questions up front. If Ken did, I didn't receive them, so you'll have to ask them again. So who's got a question? Jim, you're muted, Jim.
So I understand from the correspondence we've received so far that there's a plan for separate entrances into Addith. And I find that disturbing and would like to understand it.
Okay. The plan is to have, so you're familiar with the front of Addith, and their entrance as you're standing in front is to the left with the overhang. And on the right is their school entrance. That will be our entrance. That will be where our offices are. But that being said, you can use either entrance. The entrance on the school side, which will be ours by our office, will have our signage on it and say Temple Concord, but you will have a fob that will work both doors. So you can enter at either entrance. It doesn't matter, just as they can enter at our entrance.
Okay, so a follow-up then, are we sharing the same worship space, or that the two of those sounded connected to me?
Yes, that is the initial plan, to share the sanctuary and the chapel. Obviously, it's working out the time schedules and such. We do have an area in the social hall that the project manager and architects have laid out if Rabbi and Cantor deem and Cherie after some time that, it's not working out. We kind of need our own worship space. We have plans to have, it's kind of a temporary to a permanent space built. So at the get-go, yes, we are sharing sanctuary and chapel.
So I still don't understand why we need a separate sign and a separate door, but I guess there's a reason for that.
Well, the separate sign is because we're Temple Concord. We're not Temple Addith, we're not merging. And so we'd like to have our own identity. The signage on Kimber Road will be changed as well. Temple Addith was looking to put up a new sign, and so they put that on hold while we were waiting for our board to vote. So the signage on Kimber Road will say Temple Addith and Temple Concord. And again, really it's because our offices will be on that side, Jim. So if you enter on Addith's side, that's where, so for services, you'll likely enter on their side. It's close to the chapel and sanctuary.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And likewise, the religious school is on the school side, and their religious school is also, and so they'll likely be entering also at times on our side as well as their early learning centers on that side as well, though they have a separate entrance on the other side of the building. But I think everybody's going to use everybody's entrances, but it definitely makes it more convenient to have our own entrance where our main offices are for any time you're going in that way. But like Jeanette said, we'll be sharing and we'll be passing each other, waving.
And
So.
quite honestly, our entrance is closer to the parking lot, so it's closer to get into. Yes, Beatrice, or Bernice, sorry. Oh, you're muted.
Are
Hold
both
on.
are both entrances accessible?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That was it? Okay.
That was it for that. For that.
Jennifer? Oh, you're muted.
Really
Oh,
don't
go
want
ahead.
me. You mentioned key fobs. Do all members get key fobs? Is that how they do it there, or?
That is how they do it. Yes, every member has a key fob, and the cost of that is included in our lease. So every member will be receiving a key fob.
Okay. What about
every member of the family? So I don't know if there's an age limit, but every adult member will have a key fob.
Okay. What about what happens like with our security people?
So that's obviously up to Cherie and Rabbi and Cantor and the board. But the plan moving forward and going over there is to keep our security as is, our security protocols and policies. So right now, Temple Concord, anytime there are children in the building, we have armed security for Friday night services, armed security and such. So plan is to keep as normal until we get there.
Do they have that as well? I'm just curious.
They only used armed security guards for community events and high holidays. If somebody requests it for a life cycle event or something.
Gotcha. Another question I had, just because I know that one of the trends in the US is sharing spaces in general with multiple congregations. Is that like something that's being looked at, or?
Not in general, no. This is a temporary space, and the board's plan is a 3-year plan. So once we move there, the visioning process is going to start hopefully this summer. And the plan is that by the end of the 3rd year, we will have a plan where our permanent home will be, whether or not we will stay temporarily there longer. No, the plan is not to stay there long-term sharing a space.
I should mention that the timing of this is interesting. So the timing is reliant on 2 factors at the moment. One, obviously, is the sale of our building. And it looks like the closing of that sale could be in December. It could be in March. We're not entirely sure. The other, of course, is the pandemic. And regardless of when the building closes, whether we'll be able to gather in public again in numbers is totally up in the air. I can tell you that as a congregation, we are following the advice of the scientists, and we're being very, very careful and cautious with that. My strong sense is we will still be on Madison Street for high holidays this fall for sure. Although my strong sense is we're not going to be on Madison Street, that we're going to be each in our own homes doing high holidays like this. I don't know when we're going to be in a building together again. It's possible that we may not be fully gathered again until there's a vaccine, which could push us out a year and a half, something like that. So the question of when we actually physically start doing activities in a different building is a wide open question. And as I say, we're leaning on scientists. We're not listening to political or business leaders on that one. We're following what makes sense for the health and safety of our people. All that being said, it means that all of us are living with a little uncertainty for a little while longer.
Yes.
Which can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but we're going to keep doing what we're doing, which is creating community and enjoying our community like this, online and connecting with each other as best we can. And Cantor and I are both committed to doing everything we can to make that work, as we are to making it work wherever we eventually get to unpack our bags and physically congregate. There was no way to predict any of this stuff, even 5 months ago, and so we're playing it out and doing our best. But there is a fair degree of uncertainty with all of it.
Exactly.
Thank you. Does our lease start on a certain day, or could that be pushed out based on our closing date and all of that?
Our lease is, Jeanette, you can answer this one. I don't even get into that.
And our lease is flexible. So whenever for the contract, the purchaser needs to give us 60 days notice prior to closing. So once Landmark does that, we will go to our architect and contractors and begin development. And the lease will start on our closing date. Julie?
Wait, okay.
I know this is a little tiny bit off topic, but is there a concern that the Landmark people will postpone the purchase because right now they probably won't have students there? Or do you think they're looking more long range than that?
Jeanette, you're muted. There you go.
Sorry about that. So right now, conversations with the developer are, everything's moving ahead as planned. Originally, the plan was to break ground this spring and have it developed for occupancy this fall of 2020. That is now pushed out to fall of 2021. So I believe they're hopeful that things will go back to normal. And so, yes, we're moving ahead. Warren Wolfson, who's our legal counsel, is in constant contact with Landmark and their legal counsel as well. And we have no indication that they're wavering at all.
Will we be sharing a kitchen with them? Obviously.
Yes, they have 2 kitchens and it will be kosher. But I do not know the exact protocols that are in place for that. Rabbi and Cantor, I think you spoke about that maybe at the clergy meeting. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. They operate a kosher kitchen, and we'll follow those guidelines. It will mean a couple of changes for us. Probably the most noticeable change will be that we won't be able to do potlucks while we're there. It's possible, I don't want to get people's hopes up, but it's possible that we could figure out a way to do a dairy potluck. I know there are some conservative synagogues that do that. Beth Shalom, for example, switched over to doing that some years ago. But in the interim, we're going to follow their kashrut policies. What it'll mean for our Shabbat dinners and all of that stuff, frankly, is just using a different caterer. We've been using Bianchi's Catering, and we'll switch over to a kosher caterer. That's about the biggest difference. The cost differential, at least that I've seen in catering numbers, is negligible on Shabbat dinner kinds of things. As you get into fancier events, catering bills do all sorts of interesting things. But in terms of regular Shabbat dinners, holiday dinners, that sort of thing, cost changes are negligible. And so that'll be the switch. In terms of doing cooking in the kitchen, we're still obviously allowed to do that. That's totally okay, assuming the health business gets settled. But beyond the pandemic side of that, we can certainly do cooking classes and such. We've got to just follow their kashrut rules. They have kicked around with hiring sort of a kitchen coordinator kind of person to sort of oversee the whole thing. If they do that, that's the sort of thing that we'll be involved with, and we'll spend time with that person. I'm not overly concerned about it, to be really honest with you. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's likely to not be terribly noticeable. It'll be noticeable. I'm trying to think of places it would be. So potlucks it would be, and then there may be 2 meals a year where we cater from a restaurant. So for the new member dinner for a bunch of years, we were catering in from Dinosaur. That sort of thing will go by the wayside for the time being. Barbecues outside in the summertime will be almost identical. In fact, ours have been kosher for years. Kosher burgers and kosher dogs, so that's no real switch. My sense is that it's a much simpler thing than what most people realize.
Okay.
And so, we'll work through whatever the things are, but we've had good conversations among clergy back and forth, and there's no reason to imagine that it'll be anything other than relatively easy. So.
Anybody else? Jen?
Will we be combining 4 things more than what we have in the past?
That's up to the rabbi and Cantor and Cherie and the schools. I don't know. It certainly makes it easy. Rabbi and Cantor, do you want to speak to that?
Initially, the charge is to run our same program as a temple, just in a different building. And so the confusion, of course, is that we don't know when that's going to be, right? But if people want to come be a part of something, they're certainly welcome to, as they always have been. I mean, most of our things have been open to the community anyway, as have most of Temple Adath Yeshurun's things been open. So my guess is that while we're doing the visioning process, we're likely to focus more on ourselves and see where that process sort of leads us. Nobody, I mean, at least in the conversations I've had with the leadership at Temple Addith, neither of us have been either aggressively for or against doing things together. It's sort of been, let's figure ourselves out and then see where it takes us. And I suspect that's what we'll do. I mean, I don't want to speak for the cantor, so Kari, if you've got something you want to add in here.
So, we have been building up a sort of yearly repertoire of joint programming with all of the congregations, and likely that will continue forward, but that will, of course, not only include Temple Addith Yeshurun, but also Beth Shalom and when appropriate, Shari Torah when we can. So I think that those things will still continue when it's the right thing to do, and then when we have our own programming and that's the right thing to do, we'll continue that. I don't think, as Rabbi said, at least in the beginning, that we have any plans to change how we're programming significantly.
The other connected piece here is that the visioning process is hopefully going to help us first get a clear snapshot of who we are today, and then help us create a vision of who we want to become. The initial thought was that would wait until we're in the new building. Given the circumstances that we've got between both closing dates and the pandemic, that visioning process is likely to start much sooner. It's likely to start this summer before we actually do the move. And I'm positive that some of those questions of sharing versus doing our own will pop up in the visioning process. At least I hope they do, because I think those are fairly important questions to be asking. And I think the visioning process, as much as we've needed congregational input and concern in the visioning even more so. We're going to need as many voices as possible as part of that to get as complete a picture as possible. And we're almost for sure going to need somebody to help us guide us through that. That's a piece where we're going to need some expert help. And so all of that is in process now. And my hope is that we're up and running with that stuff sometime midsummer. And we'll see where that visioning process leads us. I mean, if we knew where we were going with all of that, we wouldn't need the process, right? So we'll work all of that through. And that's a really exciting thing for the congregation, because it allows us to dream and connect with each other and do all sorts of things that we as a congregation haven't done in a real formal way in a long time. So I think that's a really exciting step for all of us. And welcome.
Thank you. Bernice?
Oh, I was just thinking that in fact, the Zoom method probably will allow greater participation from people who might not be able to make a particular meeting.
Yeah, there are advantages to the Zoom world in terms of inclusion. That we've talked about this going forward. We're going to have some sort of Zoom online capability with services and programs going forward, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know we're reaching. Our attendance on Friday night services has been somewhere between 2 and 6 times what it was in person. So the quietest night, the quietest services have still had double or triple what our regular attendance was physically in person before the pandemic. Our larger ones are like 5-6 times.
Yeah.
We're going to smoke that advantage for everything we can.
Nancy? Nan, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay, Jim?
And just to kind of endorse what I think is already the value, I understand that this process of selecting a place and moving forward needed a tight decision that wasn't where the process wasn't shared with the congregation. I understand that. I really am looking forward to a much more open process for this visioning thing. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I really want to make that point emphatic about how much engagement there really has to be here.
And you're exactly right, Jim, and that will happen. That is part of the plan. With the temporary location, we were under a very tight time frame, and as you know, you understand, obviously, it had to be kept we weren't trying to keep it behind closed doors, but in order to move it along, it needed to be done that way. So I appreciate you saying that, and know that we're making all efforts to include everybody in the congregation, and so we will do that.
Jim, I don't know if you're preaching to the choir as much as preaching to the cantor. She's the only.
Welcome, Mr. President.
Hello, everyone. You meeting at 9 o'clock this morning?
Yeah, we did. Thanks for throwing me under the bus there. I think I've done okay though, but I'm glad you're here. We're about done.
My time is as usual.
What we've learned is 9 o'clock Monday morning meetings maybe is not the best. One of us always forgets.
I could make up an excuse, but I won't. I forget.
This was my second meeting today.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, Gewalt, there's not enough coffee.
Saying good morning to Dill next to you does not count as a meeting, Jim.
Thank you. All right, any other questions?
Oh, I was still asleep when he had his 8 o'clock meeting.
Good for you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Okay, any other questions?
Well, what did I miss? Was it good?
I'll fill you in lots and lots of stuff. It was good. All right, so Rabbi, I think we're ready to conclude with a wrap up from you.
All right, so look, the short of all of this is what we're doing right now is the essential piece. At the end, this is the physical building allows for other interaction. It isn't necessarily an end itself, it's a means to an end. And what makes a congregation, what makes us unique is each of us. And so as we move from one building to another, it's like a family moving from one home to another. The family, the patterns may change a little bit, but the essence of the family is the same. The care and concern that people have for each other is the same. The interactions, the relationships, all of that continues. So at the end, it's about you and me. It's about each of us looking in the box next to us on this, in the Zoom, but it's also looking at the person next to us in the pew when we could gather together, or you know, the people with whom we pray and we celebrate and we comfort, all of that. That's what this is all about. This is about being able to continue all of that in the best way possible. And so that's what we're committed to doing. It is looking at each of us and saying, how can we connect best with each other, and what can we do to ensure that that will continue, not just for us, but for generations to come, so that in 180 years, people will look back and say, you know, the temple had an interesting challenge, but look at how they responded. Look what they did, and look what they produced to continue the trajectory of this holy gathering. That's what we're trying to do. And that has all sorts of interesting challenges and twists and turns along the way. But in its essence, it's all about us. It's about each of us individually and each of us collectively.
Very nice. Thank you. Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Wait, hold on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to mention what was going on with the council or any of that. Or if you want to say
I can. So the Common Council is meeting today at 1 o'clock, actually. So the steering committee meeting will be tomorrow, just so you know, to determine the fate of our property. For those of you who don't know, the Landmark Preservation Board a couple of months ago designated the entire 910 Madison Street property as historic, which really meant that in order to develop on it, in order to get the approval of the Common Council, we would have to jump through the developer would have to jump through hoops and get all of the appropriate permits, which wouldn't be easy. So we've had a team from the steering committee working with the Common Councilors and our legal counsel and Landmark's legal counsel to put forth a case to change the proposal to designate only the sanctuary as being historic and to preserve that part of the building, that the rest of the building really means nothing and is really falling to shambles around us. So that being said, our final fate will be determined today at 1 o'clock. We are on the agenda to go before the Common Council. Well, we are not personally, but the Common Councilors will be speaking to determine our fate. And from what I hear from our counsel, legal counsel, we have a really, really good chance. There are 3 different outcomes that could happen, and all 3 of them are good and in our favor. So fingers crossed, if it happens, the developer will continue on, as you asked before, Jill, that they still have all plans and have been working very hard and putting in a lot of money. So there's no indication that it won't happen unless it can't. 1 o'clock today.
Is that the one that we can, watch or not watch?
I don't know. In the past, we've never been able to participate in the hearings. They've been closed, but since they're available via Webinex now, I think we can call in, but I'm not sure. I can find out for sure, and if you're interested, I can send you an email, Jen, and let you know.
I think they're doing everything on WebEx now, and I think they're required. There's an open meeting law that I think requires if they're taking a vote, it's got to be in an open meeting.
Okay.
My recollection, I mean, I know I'm the chair of the Human Rights Commission for the city and county, and when we do a vote, we've got to have it in an open meeting, whether it's open on, an electronic format like this or in person. My recollection is that council, if they're going to vote, has to be an open session. And so the WebEx thing, WebEx, if you haven't used it, is a little funky. Zoom is a little smoother.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I was trying to be nice, but yes.
If you're going to, Jennifer, call. Don't try to use your computer. It's just easier to call and listen on the phone. There are too many hiccups the other way. So, but I have it pulled up right now. I'll send you the phone number if you want. And if anybody else wants to, just let me know.
So I'm just curious why sorry, I didn't read.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish. And then Jim.
Okay. I'm just curious if our lawyers feel like there's all the outcomes that could be are positive, then what is the impact that this isn't coming out right? Like the historical committee, then like what's their role? I don't know if do you know what I'm trying to say?
So
like,
without kind of telling you exactly what the outcomes are, the first outcome is the optimum one, where they only designate the sanctuary. The third outcome, which is the least optimal, could require Landmark to get a bunch of different permits, which might prolong the closing a little bit longer, but it's possible. The way it's designated right now, it's unlikely that they would be able to get the permits that they need. So, and quite honestly, I would share it with you, but I'm not really all that familiar with what the second and third outcomes are. It's too many legal terms for me to reconvey it to you. So, but yeah. All 3 of them will make it happen. So hopefully one of the 3 will happen.
And what are the financial implications of all of this? Like, it feels like as it gets drawn out, I assume our legal bills grow and get bigger and the chances of things go down, or?
Well, so far our wonderful legal counsel has been doing this all pro bono. The lost income on the investment is really what's hurting us right now. We had anticipated we would have closed by the summer, having the $9 million to spend $1.6 million and invest the rest. And so anytime we don't have that money invested, it's lost income to us. And our deficit continues to happen, and we continue to eat into our endowment. So that's really the biggest negative right now. Jim, did you have a question?
No, I think he was just raising his hand to say that he wanted to get the information, the WebEx.
Oh, very good, very good. Let me write that down. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah.
I got it. I found it on their website.
Oh, okay, very good.
On the Common Council website?
Yeah. Go to their calendar and
Okay.
and then go to public meetings and then there.
And you'll want to be on there right at 1. We are first on the agenda, I see. So, and it happens very quickly. They get things done very.
Well, because they've already met and had their discussions. This is just the vote, right?
Well, I mean, the attorneys are bringing new information to them today, so I don't know how that works, whether the vote will be deferred again. Hopefully not. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Understood. Thank you. Don't mean to take up time with it.
Oh, no, anything. And of course, anytime you have questions, certainly email any of us or call us. Happy to answer. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Enjoy your morning.
Thank
Yep, you
you.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.